Hi, hello, everybody. My name is Megan Griffith, and I am your keynote speaker for the Plural Positivity World Conference 2026. A quick visual description of me. I am a white woman. I am plus sized. I'm wearing a black and white polka dotted dress with a gold necklace and gold dangly earrings that look like a star and a moon. I have relatively blondish hair, and I am wearing clear glasses. I'm also wearing a couple of rings. And before we dive into the presentation, I just want to give a quick trigger warning. I will be discussing harmful experiences in the therapy room, harmful experiences with previous therapists of mine. I will be giving specific details about the harm that they have done, primarily through gaslighting and invalidation. And I will give that trigger in the presentation so that you can go ahead and skip that section if you would like to. Please know that if this is going to trigger you in an unhelpful or unmanageable way, you do not have to watch this presentation or you don't have to watch that part of the presentation. There is absolutely no harm in taking care of yourself. And without any further ado, let's dive on in. So the presentation that I have for you today is called Your Therapist is Not Your Savior. You are. How to Place Trust Back in Your Own Hands. And I am so excited. So let's go ahead and dive in. First, I wanted to go over the agenda for the day so that everybody knows what to expect and what's coming next. So first, I will introduce you to me and my system. Next, I'll talk about why I actually really love therapy. This is not a therapy bashing session, although there will be some therapy critique, which is the next section, the harm that therapy can do for plurals. Next, we'll talk about how you can find empowerment in therapy. And also, we will talk about finding empowerment outside of therapy. And either option, both options are good. Finally, we will end with some closing thoughts. So, hi there. My name is Megan Griffith. I use she, they pronouns. For me, my they pronouns actually have nothing to do with my gender. It has everything to do with my plurality. I'm fairly certain all of my parts are female, but she, they, either way works for me. Some diagnoses that I have accrued over the years include autism, ADHD, depression, and now OSDD, which of course stands for Other Specified Dissociative Disorder. What I do. I am a shame oracle and psychospiritual healer, which basically means that I use a mixture of psychology, lived experience, witchiness, and energy work to help people heal their shame, which I love. I love my job. And then a couple of fun facts about me as a human being. I'm a mom of 3 little kids. I have a 6-year-old and 2.5-year-old twins, which is chaos, absolute chaos, but very fun. We have a bit of a love-hate relationship with dyeing our hair. I love the idea of dyeing my hair, but every time I do, there's some part who's unhappy about it and other parts who are happy about it, and it gets weird. What we've settled on recently is like calico hair. You probably can't tell because it's kind of wet and stuff, but but it's like blonde, brown, and red, and that actually seems to appease most of us. So we found something that works. Although now I find myself missing the dopamine hit of dyeing my hair a funny color. Anyway, one more fun fact about me is that I am currently writing a novel about the astrological signs coming to life on Earth. I am almost done with the first draft and I'm having such a blast writing it. So that is me, my body, my singular kind of identity, but this is my system. So everyone identifies their parts, their selves, their alters, their headmates differently. For me, I personally usually use the term selves or parts. Those are what feel most right to me. And I identify myself through color and shape. So I have 2 really main fronters in my system, and that is cornflower blue and mint green. So cornflower blue is very carefree and productive. She is the version of myself that I think everyone else wants me to be. And also, if I'm being honest, the version of myself that it's easiest to be. You know, it's easy to be carefree and productive, or it feels, I don't know how to describe it. It feels like natural, I guess, when I'm in that part, of course. Anyway, then there's Mint Green, who is my irritable and overfunctioning part, who is another common fronter. Basically, Mint Green is the one who swoops in when nobody else can get shit done. And so Unfortunately, she doesn't really know what it is to be relaxed, and we're working on that for her because that sucks to be a part that literally only exists in overwhelm and irritability. From there, we have my white part, which is very intellectual, no feelings, all logic, all the time. Um, and the way these overlap show how I often transition from one to the other. So this is kind of a map of my parts in the sense of like the bigger they are, the more often they front. And then also the more they overlap, the more those parts can like co-front or have passive influence on each other, stuff like that. So like for example, my carefree and productive part is in no way touching my more depressed parts because they really hardly ever co-front or have any influence on each other at all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's introduce all the parts first. Then we have my child part who expresses needs. This is Peach. I actually only recently discovered Peach in therapy. I knew about a lot of these parts, but at one point my therapist was asking about how I get from cornflower blue over to my restless, reckless, self-loathing orange part. And she's like, they don't touch. So how do you get there? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. She's like, you go from 0 to 100 and it's like you miss the ramp. Like I dissociate away the ramp that brings me from being carefree to being like full of self-loathing. And we realized that I actually have a child part a little who used to express our needs. But she was not received very well and her needs were not met. And so Mint Green started covering her up and was like, no, you need protected. Like you're just getting stomped on. Um, so she's there, but she does not front hardly ever. We're trying to get to a place where we can at least like internally communicate with her, but yeah, Mint Green really, really, really hides her. Then we have my bright red part, which is a specific type of anger. It's like rage that's rooted in fear. There's a lot of anger associated with fear that happiness doesn't last, that good things are a scam, and that I don't deserve them or something. And there's like this anger that goes along with that. So that is that red part. Then we have childlike happiness. So I'm not totally clear if this part is an actual little or if they are just childlike. Um, but this part is really, it's that like bubblegum pink, happy-go-lucky, like everything is amazing. Like you go to the water park and you get an ice cream and like it's that vibe. Next up, we have Dusty Rose, and this is my more sensual presence. And the reason I call it that is because it can be a more sexual part for sure, but it's not always about like sex. It's also about like intimacy and vulnerability, and also about presence. This is one of my parts who, when I am in this part, I am in this part. Like I am very present, which I'm just not a very present person in all my other parts. Like overly intellectual is not a very in my body kind of part, right? This is an in my body part for sure. And it's interesting that the part that allows me to be in my body is what connects my carefree self with some of the more frustrating, obviously still important, but harder to experience parts in my system, which are my black part, which is hopeless, feels lots of hatred towards myself and also the world, and is often suicidal. And then I also have this other part that, you know, mental health care professionals would probably call agitated depression or a mixed episode or whatever, but is actually a part for me that is very restless, reckless, and self-loathing. It's like all of these feelings, but with the energy dial turned up to 11. So this is my system of colors. Thank you so much for listening to all of this. It's really lovely to introduce all of myself to people who get it. Some of you may have noticed that this says, my system, main. That is because I do have a subsystem as well, who I would also like to introduce you to, but this is the main parts that I find myself cycling through. I also have this kind of subsystem of 3 parts, and there is a persecutor, a protector, and an exile. So the persecutor is the very angry mother figure, right? Who is just flying off the handle all the time. Then we have a very angry teenager. She's very angry at the mother because the mother is angry at a baby and the baby is just a baby. And so the teenager is mad and trying to protect the baby with by pointing rage towards the mother. So rage is going from the mother to the baby, rage is going from the teenager to the mother. But what's not happening is there's no love being poured into the baby by anyone. And so the baby feels very, very abandoned. This is like a little part for me. I do hear like a baby crying in my head relatively frequently. Granted, I do have three small children, but a lot of them are not like infants anymore. So they're not infants anymore. Um, but yeah, there is definitely a part of me who feels very abandoned by these other parts who are just trying to figure their shit out, you know? So this is my little subsystem as well. And I have no idea how this subsystem fits into the main system. Don't ask me. I'm not sure. I just know that they both exist. Okay, that's me. Thank you so much for listening to me yap about who I am as a plural system. It's really healing for me to get to do that with you all. But now I want to dive into the meat of this presentation, which is all about therapy and how to take your power back in a therapeutic setting. So, therapy can absolutely heal. Okay. I just want to be like upfront about that. Therapy can be so helpful. This is not, like I said, not a therapy bashing party. I have personally been in therapy for 13 years. And funnily enough, I was diagnosed with OSDD last year. And the average amount of time that I found a study on this, the average amount of time it takes to be accurately diagnosed with a dissociative disorder after starting to seek help is about 12 years. And it took exactly 12 years for me to be diagnosed with OSDD, which is just super fascinating to me. So I wanted to go through a couple of examples in which therapy has helped me. So first, therapy validated my emotions when my family could not. Emotional intelligence, emotional sensitivity is not a primary like value of a large portion of my family. And so they really didn't have the tools to validate all the things I was feeling. And so I very much grew up with the understanding that I felt too much or I felt the wrong things. And therapy was a really lovely, helpful way for me to finally hear from an external source, hey, actually, that's fine. Like the way you're feeling actually totally makes sense. And that was huge for me. It talk about like rewiring your brain chemistry. Like it really changed everything for me to be able to experience an emotion and not immediately think it's a mistake, you know? So that was really big. Therapy has also given me tools for regulating my emotions that I was never taught anywhere else. This is a big thing. I think in our current society, therapy is like the place that you get healing. And we've kind of lost touch with other modalities of healing. It's one of the reasons I'm a psychospiritual healer. I'm trying to bring healing back into like the general cultural zeitgeist and like remind people that there are ways to heal outside of therapy. But right now, like there just aren't a lot of tools out there that we learn about in school or from our family or in sports or anything like that except for therapy. Like therapy is where we learn these tools. So for example, I learned about EFT tapping, which I like can't even tell you how much I love EFT tapping. If you don't know what EFT tapping is, it stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. It is supported by both Western medicine and traditional Chinese medicine. They agree that it's really effective, especially for anxiety and trauma. And basically, what you do is you tap these really specific spots, mostly on your face and on your head and stuff. And as you tap, you talk yourself through a difficult emotion. And everyone has a different way of doing it. But I really like to go acknowledgement. I just acknowledge the way I'm feeling. Validation, it makes sense that you're feeling this because, and then a very gentle reframe. Nothing crazy, nothing like going from like I'm broke and I have no money to like I'm a millionaire. Like, okay, just a gentle reframe. So from like I'm broke and I have no money to like I'm broke and I have no money and I am also a good person and it is like, there is hope somewhere, hopefully. Like that would be a gentle reframe I might do. But therapy taught me about EFT tapping, and EFT is like such a gentle way of grounding that I find works for my system. Some other tools that I learned were some journaling techniques that I've incorporated into like my daily, or not quite daily habits. I do have ADHD. I don't do anything daily. Uh, but journaling habits and tools for regulation like cold. I had no idea that cold could down-regulate your nervous system and heat tends to up-regulate your nervous system. I had no idea about any of that before therapy. So yeah, I learned a lot in therapy. Therapy has also encouraged me to tell my story. Like I said, I grew up in a family where emotions were not always prioritized, and I was a very emotional person, and therefore I didn't always feel very prioritized. Even when that's not how anyone meant it, that's how it felt, you know? And so it sometimes felt like my story, my experience of the world wasn't worth sharing. And therapy really taught me that it is worth sharing. And I've done that a lot through social media. I'm here giving this keynote speech now. And yeah, just talking about what my experience is like and having others listen has been really healing, both in therapy and outside of therapy. So it also gave me a space to practice taking relational risks. This is my new favorite way to use therapy. I've only been doing this for the last like year or so, but basically, I have a lot of fears around interacting with other people. I'm always very nervous that they're going to hate me or I'm going to do something really wrong or it's going to somehow end the relationship. And so therapy is giving me a space to take those risks that I don't feel safe enough to take in real life. So, for example, a while back, probably almost a year ago, my therapist said something in therapy that I didn't agree with, and it rubbed me the wrong way. But I didn't say anything in the moment because I was too freaked out. I was like, if I say something, she's going to hate me. She's going to yell at me, which I have had therapists do, which we'll talk about that later. So, anyway, I was too nervous to say anything in the moment. But then later, I texted her and I said, hey, you said this thing and I didn't like it. And here's why. And that is an emotional risk, a relational risk, being honest about my feelings. And then she responded and she was so lovely and we worked it out. It's this thing called rupture and repair, right? Humans have to have rupture in between them because no two humans are the same. We're going to run into conflict, We're going to disagree, we're going to argue, we're going to feel things that are different from each other. The thing that's so powerful is when we have that rupture and then we repair it. So many of us, whether you're plural or not, so many of us grew up with plenty of rupture and no repair. And therapy is such a great place to practice taking risks that might result in rupture while trusting and knowing that repair can also take place. And that's like been really huge for me. And finally, therapy has consistently provided a pressure relief valve for when I am in crisis. So when I was in college, I was in crisis a lot. And I had therapy once every 2 weeks, should have been way more than that. I have no idea what they thought they were doing. But in between those sessions every 2 weeks, they also had something called drop-in hours. And so I would go to the drop-in hours and basically it literally felt like I was like a steam pot and they were just popping the release valve and letting all the steam flow out. And that's how I survived my college experience was just getting that relief valve opened every now and again in therapy. So these are some amazing things therapy has done for me, and I am so grateful for my experiences in therapy. I do not hate therapy. Okay. I do not. If you take anything away from this presentation, please don't let it be that, like, oh, therapy is horrible and convinces you that you don't have any agency. And like, it can do that. And we're going to talk about it. But therapy can also be tremendously, tremendously helpful. I don't hate therapy, but therapy can hurt too. So, I have had some really bad therapists over the years. And when I say bad therapists, sometimes we were just a bad fit, but other times they did harm that could have been avoided if they had better training or if they had more empathy or more curiosity. And that really sucks. So, the scary, scary truth of it all is that even the good but not great therapists were not dissociation or trauma or plurality informed, like at all. Like at all. So even the therapists who didn't actively do harm still like weren't designed to help me and us and our system. And that just feels really lonely, if nothing else. So I am going to give a brief trigger warning for this particular section of the presentation. I am going to talk about harmful experiences in therapy. There will be instances of someone yelling or raising their voice, of dismissal and abandonment. So if that's going to be triggering for you, please just go ahead and skip ahead a little bit. Okay. Um, so ways therapy has harmed me. I share this because not just to like get it off my chest, I share this because I think it is an important way for us to connect through like our harmful therapy experiences. Because sometimes when therapy goes really wrong, it feels like maybe it's our fault, right? They're the therapist, they're the professional. Surely, if it's not working, it must be because of us. And I just never want anyone to feel that way. I have also had bad experiences in therapy, and I don't think it was my fault. And I also don't think your bad experiences were your fault. So, first, I had a therapist who completely dismissed my autism without asking a single question. I brought it up to her. I said, "Hey, I've been seeing a lot of TikToks about this. Like, I think it actually describes me pretty well. I'm pretty sure I'm autistic." And um, she, without asking a single question, didn't ask me what symptoms I related to, didn't ask me what kind of TikToks I was seeing, didn't ask me how many I had watched, didn't ask me if I had taken any self-assessments, which I had, and scored very high. No, didn't ask any of that. She simply said, well, I work with neurodivergent people and I don't really see that in you. Rough, dude. Rough. Um, I also have had many therapists claim that we all have parts when I tried to bring up that I was plural. I am so sure everyone who's watching this has been through this, but this is so hard because the thing is they're not wrong. Of course we all have parts, but not all of us have parts that we can't access. Not all of us have parts with huge chasms between them. Not all of us have parts who like have full like deep emotional experiences that are completely separate from another part. And yeah, so that's always so frustrating when that happens. This was probably one of the hardest experiences I had was I had a therapist who yelled at me while I was sobbing and having a dissociative autistic meltdown in her office. So what happened is I was having a really hard time. I was feeling really hopeless, but I found this great song that explained how I felt. I believe it's called Together Again from the Bright Sessions, which is like an audio drama podcast, but there's a musical episode. Anyway, it's brilliant. You should look it up. But I played it for her and she seemed so offended by this song for some reason. And she was asking me like, "Well, do you trust me?" And I was like, "I mean, I want to, but not really, not yet." And she got so upset and offended and I'm like sobbing. And she told me, "Well, you should go find a different therapist who will just give you the diagnosis you so clearly want." Because at the time, I was very convinced I had borderline personality disorder, which makes a lot of sense. Borderline is also a highly dissociative disorder. So I was tapping into, hey, there's something going on here that people are missing. And instead of acknowledging that or helping me address that, she completely dismissed it. And don't get me wrong, it's always okay for a therapist to suggest that you find someone who can help you more. But to make that suggestion mid meltdown was meant to hurt me. Like, make no mistake. That is not how a therapist responsibly refers you to someone else, right? That was meant to hurt my feelings, and it did. Um, And then a little bonus tidbit. I decided I didn't want to see her anymore after that. I decided that was not okay. And but I kept our next appointment so I could break up with her in person and let her know. And I wore like my combat boots and my skater skirt and sparkly eyeshadow. I was like ready to be a badass about it. And I actually was. I was pretty badass about it. Um, but I went in and I told her, "Hey, I really get the feeling that you're projecting onto me. Like several times you've told me how much you relate to what I'm saying, and then when I say something you don't seem to relate to, you get really upset, and I just don't understand what's happening here. And the way you treated me last time was really irresponsible and unhelpful." And she called me a narcissist, which is fine, by the way. Like, narcissistic personality disorder is very real, and the people experiencing it have undergone tons of trauma. And, but again, there's a responsible and helpful way to bring up to someone that they might have some narcissistic tendencies or have narcissistic personality disorder. And this was not it. It was meant to hurt me. Whew, oh boy. So, yeah, that was unhelpful. And finally, this is like, it feels like a little thing, but it's really not little. This is more of a big deal than I think people realize. I've had therapists insist that I wasn't like those people when I tried to bring up my thoughts that I might have a personality disorder. The reason this is such a red flag for me and why this did a lot of harm is because it creates good mentally ill people and bad mentally ill people. And that is a false dichotomy, right? There are not good and bad men. I mean, there are, but it's not based on diagnosis. It's based on the actions you take and the type of person you are and whether or not you hold yourself accountable and stuff like that. Um, and trying to separate us and say, yes, I can help you, but basically it means that the therapist's support is conditional. That's what this indicates. Because what if, as we do our work, we discover I do have a personality disorder? Well, you've already made it clear that you don't like those people. So now I feel like you don't like me. Right. And that's, yeah, completely not okay. We rise together or not at all. So maybe worst of all, out of all of these things that have happened in therapy, the long-term effects of it has been therapy convinced me that I couldn't be trusted, that I was an unreliable narrator, that in order to be well, to be healthy, to be a good person, I had to shut down my own intuition and trust my therapist above myself. And this is honestly something I'm just recently coming to terms with. I was misdiagnosed with bipolar for a long time, and I think this is something that happens to a lot of people diagnosed with bipolar, whether it's accurate or not, because the emotions are so extreme in bipolar, and not just emotions, the energy state, the actions can, all of it can be so extreme. Um, the way some therapists, at least in my experience, a lot of therapists tend to treat bipolar is basically by saying, okay, take these medications even if you don't want to. And if you get an urge to do anything like big and grandiose, shut it down. And if you get the urge to be sad, shut it down. Basically, just shut down every part of yourself and try to just be baseline all the time. That's not human. That's not a human thing to do. Humans are not just at baseline all the time. And bipolar people should not be held to this like weird standard that in order to be healthy, they have to do that. And therapy through my bipolar misdiagnosis, but also like I've had it happen through like my ADHD diagnosis as well. It's like, hey, don't be impulsive. And like I find myself really worried, like, am I making a good decision or an impulsive decision? And stuff like that. So therapy has sometimes frequently convinced me that I can't be trusted and that I have to trust my care team instead of myself. It can't be both and, right? This is really common just in therapy in general, like I mentioned with folks diagnosed with bipolar, but it's also so common for plural folks because we are constantly told, either directly or indirectly, that we cannot be trusted and we should trust our care team instead. We often believe people who say this because, in a way, it makes some sense, right? Our psyche is like a bunch of strings being pulled in opposite directions. How are you supposed to trust that? How are you supposed to trust yourself when maybe mint green is saying do this, but orange is saying do this, and bubblegum pink is saying, but I want to do this? How are you supposed to trust the right decision? This is really common for therapists to kind of take advantage of this in order to put themselves in a position of power over you, not power with you, power over you. And that is not helpful. I would like to, what if we are not a series of strings being pulled apart? What if we are cross beams holding each other up? Dissociation is so often adaptive. It is meant to keep us safe and protected and together, you know? And sometimes the best way to do that is to break apart so that you can hold each other up. What if it's possible to need support from a care team? Heaven knows I do. And also be able to trust ourselves in some capacities. What if therapy supported us as we are instead of trying to turn us into a singlet when we are not? Dissociation is absolutely not a dirty word. For a long time, I think I saw my dissociation as a form of shattering. Dissociation was the breaking apart. But I'm starting to realize that that is not totally accurate because I was already broken apart. Dissociation didn't do that. Trauma did that. Invalidation did that. Belittlement and being mocked did that. Dissociation was just how I protected myself from my own sharp edges, how I stayed emotionally safe in an emotionally volatile environment. And even though I'm out of that environment now and in a much safer environment, thank goodness, that doesn't mean my dissociation is completely maladaptive now. This is like a really black and white thing that I think sometimes happens in therapy, where even the best, most dissociation-informed, well-meaning therapists can say, well, your dissociation was adaptive while you were in that environment, and now that you're out of it, it's maladaptive. It's not that simple, okay? Yes, we're out of that environment, but we carry that environment in our brains, right? There is a traumatizer. There are memories. There are all this stuff that live rent free in our head that we still need protection from. So I think dissociation is just one of those things that therapy is sometimes ill-equipped for, or at least general therapy is sometimes ill-equipped for. Because when therapy tells us that the only way we can trust ourselves is if there's only one of us, then therapy recreates the traumatic environment of non-acceptance that made our dissociation necessary in the first place. When therapy says, here is the correct way to heal, it becomes far less helpful, right? We need to heal in a way that works for us and for our system. So, no more therapy? Maybe, but maybe not. It's totally up to you. I do believe that there is a way to do empowered therapy for plurals. Okay, so we're going to go over what that looks like. Part one is mindset. Now, I love mindset. I think it's really helpful in like life to address the way you're thinking about things, but I also want to acknowledge that it's not everything. Okay, you cannot mindset yourself out of systems of oppression. You cannot mindset yourself out of decades of trauma and abuse. Okay, so like don't think that that's what I'm saying. But just because mindset can't fix everything doesn't make it useless, right? Again, it's not black or white like that. So this is the title of the presentation. Your therapist is not your savior. And I think sometimes when we think of them that way, it reduces the amount that we can actually get out of therapy. Because if your therapist is your savior, the moment they act like a human, which they will do because they are human, we feel betrayed, abandoned. We don't feel safe anymore because we thought we were safe because we had a savior. You know, we need to learn This is so hard, but we need to learn to feel safe with humans. I don't know. And I know that's not possible for all of us. Believe me, I understand. Some of us have been through some stuff that human beings are just never going to be a safe space again. And I get that. And I respect the heck out of it. And also, if you're going to do therapy, we have to learn to trust this other human being in some capacity. Um, I also think it's important not to look at your therapist as objective, okay? No one is objective. I hate that we treat like doctors and therapists and scientists even as objective. They're not. Even when they're looking at data as objectively as they can, they have biases built in due to their lived experience. Therapists are literally just people who have read a lot of books and taken a lot of classes. Don't get me wrong, they absolutely know stuff. They absolutely have insight that could be helpful. I'm not saying there's no reason to go to therapy, but I am saying that you know yourself and yourselves best, better than any therapist ever could. I also want to add another mindset piece, which is that therapy is not here to fix you, right? Not because you're not broken. Like some of us do identify as a little bit broken, and that's fine. But the purpose of therapy is not to take all those broken things and like put them back together. The purpose of therapy, at least for me, is as a playground for trying out things in real life. Um, and I think that is, first of all, more fun. It's more fun to think of therapy as a playground than to think of it as like a way to fix all the stuff that's broken about you. Like that just, it feels better to think of it as a playground, but also like it makes it much more practical. Therapy is not just a place you go and you talk about your feelings and you go home and like nothing changes. Therapy is a place where you go and you practice the stuff that you want to do in real life, but you're too scared. And you practice it in a safer space. Part two is boundaries and expectations. So I want to be so clear. You do not have to put up with a crappy therapist. Okay. You do not have to do that. But you also can't really expect your therapist to be perfect. Remember, they're just a person. They're going to say stuff wrong. They're going to trigger you. They're going to, and like, as long as they're not doing it on purpose, that's probably a good thing. It's a thing that you through together, you know? Now, if you have a therapist like that one I mentioned before, who like was clearly intending to hurt me, like, okay, that's not a thing we want to repair. But if you have a therapist who just says something and you're like, actually, that doesn't feel right for me in my system, that rupture can lead to repair, which can lead to a stronger relationship and a more helpful therapeutic relationship, which could be great. It's also good to know ahead of time what your green flags are, which is ways that they can successfully support you. So some green flags for me are they use like affirming language about disorders I don't have. Because to me, it shows that like no matter what comes up in therapy, they're going to be supportive, even if I end up with a million new diagnoses. I think that's always been a fear of mine is like there are certain diagnoses that are safe to have and certain ones that are not safe to have. And there is some truth to that with like stigma in the world, but it's nice when a therapist is affirming about things that I don't even have because it just shows that they give a shit, I guess. Yellow flags, which is opportunities to practice that rupture and repair. So for me, this is like when they try to tell me about like cognitive distortions. And I'm like, hey, so I've done the work around cognitive distortions. I know what they are. I know I have them sometimes, but a lot of times my cognitive distortions are based in my past trauma. And I'd really rather work on that than just work on rephrasing something, but not touching the deep belief. And so that's like a chance for us to grow together. And then also red flags, which is like, nope, done, bye. And that is if a therapist ever yells at me while I'm crying ever again, like that's an instant done. Like that's weird behavior, frankly. So, and also if I ever bring up a diagnosis and they don't ask a single question, we're done. I'm not, I'm not playing with that. So just know what your flags are. And finally, part three is intuition, which I know can be really hard because we have multiple intuitions. But if your gut is off, please don't ignore it. Okay. At least investigate it, right? You don't have to act on it right away, but I want you to explore it together as a system. Try to practice a deep core belief of I'm not automatically right about everything, but I'm also automatically wrong about everything either. And like I mentioned, just being really curious about yourself and your feelings and your relationship with that therapist rather than being super judgmental right away. It's not that you can't arrive at a judgment later on, but it's helpful to start with curiosity. Now, I say all of this, and you might be thinking, Megan, that's great, but therapy has burned me one too many times, and I am done. If therapy isn't for you, there are absolutely more paths to empowerment. Okay. I don't want you thinking you're just screwed and you don't get to heal. That's not the case at all. So let's talk about empowerment outside of therapy. Part one is self education. Lived experience, both yours and others, is a treasure trove of information. Okay. Is there misinformation on TikTok? Yes, absolutely. But do I think the benefits of being able to share what it's like to be plural online outweigh the possible like instances of misinformation, especially because so often that misinformation is very quickly corrected in the comments? Like, yeah, I think it's way worth it to share our lived experiences and to learn from one another. There are also countless professional resources that are not exclusively available to therapists that you're allowed to just attend, like this conference, which is amazing. And I'm so grateful to the organizers because stuff like this changes people's lives, really. Part two, for finding empowerment outside of therapy is other helpers. Okay, therapists have burned you too many times. Great. Go see a massage therapist. Go see a Reiki healer. Go see someone like me, a psychospiritual healer who uses like witchiness and energy and psychology and ritual to help you acknowledge and heal your shame. There are so many helpers out there. Our society, I think, especially due to like colonialism and white supremacy, has convinced us that therapy is the only room we're allowed to heal in, and that is not true. You are allowed to heal in so many different ways. Okay, and part three is telling your own story. I love the empowerment that comes from talking about what you have gone through and what you are going through and how you feel. And this doesn't have to be a one-to-one like um explanation of your trauma because for a lot of us that's not helpful, right? But it can be like a personal mythology, like, hey, this is how I came to be who I am and how I feel about all of it. Like you don't have to dive into the nitty-gritty details to do that. And you might say, Megan, that sounds great, but there's lots of me. How do I create like a singular narrative? And I don't know, maybe don't. Those multiple point of view novels are like huge right now. Write a multi POV memoir. I think that would be cool as shit. I would read the crap out of that, you know? Um, so write an unreliable narrator who might be a little more reliable than they realize. I think that could be really cool too. Like you start with like the narrator is clearly unreliable, and by the end, it's like actually they've been right the whole freaking time. Uh, because that has been my experience. I thought I had health anxiety, you guys, because I was like, I think I'm autistic, and I think I have ADHD, and I think I am depressed, and I think I have borderline, and all this besides the borderline, I was right about a lot of this stuff. It just turns out I have a lot of things. So anyway, I just write your story, or if writing's not your thing, tell your story in some capacity because it matters and you matter. You will be your own savior. Don't have to wait for somebody who gets it. You don't have to wait for the right therapist. You can save yourself. And I don't say this as like a weird, toxic, like girl boss, but I say it as like you are a profound and amazing person. You contain multitudes and depths, and you can be there for yourself in a way that maybe other people can't or haven't been. And it's okay to rely on yourself. I think sometimes we're told, oh, you should go to therapy, you should go to therapy, you should go to therapy. Like, yeah, okay, maybe. And also, maybe I should learn to trust myself as well. You will be your own. You always have been. This is not new. You have been saving yourself since day one. You can do this. Thank you so much for attending this keynote speech. I have had just the most wonderful time talking with you all, and I cannot wait for the live Q&A portion. If you would like to follow me on socials, I would love that. My Instagram and my Substack are the Megan Griffith. That's Megan, Megan. And I am also on YouTube, Shame Oracle. And of course, you can always email me, hello@megangriffith.com. I would love to hear from you, and I can't wait for the Q&A. And thank you so, so much for attending this year's Plural Positivity World Conference.